Hello, everybody. Valentin Todor from Alir here. On today's session, we're going to look at staging data using Excel sheets. Okay. Let's start with a script. So we're going to go into my finance scripts, in e-procurement, create requisition, which is my favorite component to demo here. And we're going to look at this test. And as we can see in this test, we've got a test case. And again, there's a big distinction between a test script. The test script is here. It's the process itself and all the DOM objects that are interacting with the page. And the test cases are like your data sets, which are housed in the value column. Okay, so the value column is what data you're actually applying to the script. Okay, so it's very important to know the lexicon difference between a test script and a test case. And test cases only hold the data. So here you can see I actually have 3 test cases, and if I toggle it, data might change. Looks like that one is actually a completely blank one, and there's test case 3 are blank as well. And you can actually delete these old ones. Let's delete them out of here. Maybe I use them for a previous demo somewhere else. We'll just keep the default one, and you need at least one test case in here. It's a requirement to have at least one test case in a test script, in a PTF test script. And usually when you build a new test script, the default one is the name of the default one that comes on the test. Okay, you can always clone it and rename it, but I'm going to keep it as is because it does have data. We've got a user we're authenticating with. We've got some control variables. We've got some navigation pieces, and the big important piece of it is we have some data for creating the requisition line, some data for chart field and checking out right here. Okay. And what we want to do is you can always create additional test cases here by cloning it. And I've got another video on that. But what we're going to do is we're going to use Excel to load data for us. And not only are we going to load an additional data set, we're going to load many, many additional data sets. Okay. And this is a 2-step process. First, you need to create a template of your test because every single test in PTF is different. You need to create a test. I'm sorry, a template that you can fill out in Excel. Okay, so that's the first step, is to create this template. It's effectively a comma delimited CSV. Open it in Excel, load your data, and then the second step is to import it, to stage it back into PTF and load it into the tables and import the data into your test so that additional test cases can be loaded in this dropdown. Okay, so let's do step 1. So step 1, if we go up here to test, okay, so right here on this test dropdown at the top, you'll see an export and import. Okay, this should have been named test case export and test case import, but they're actually talking about the test cases themselves. Okay, so we're going to do an export. So we need to create the template first. So we're going to create export. And this is a very simple prompt that says, all right, where do you want to drop this comma delimited CSV? So I'm going to drop it so it's easier to find in a PTF folder on my desktop. It says CSV, and it's going to be just called export CSV. So I'm going to put it there. So delimiter, I'm just going to keep it as a comma. If you did have, long text fields and descriptions within your test, maybe you want to select a different one so that it doesn't run into an error, but we don't have anything in here that is going to cause an error. So I'm going to keep it as a comma, okay, delimiter. And then if you can choose to export all of them. So if you did have multiple test cases here underneath this dropdown, you can select all of them and it will export all of them into a CSV, or you can just select the current one that's currently open. Okay, I'm going to do all, it doesn't matter because I only have one. So all you do here is you press start. This little progress bar will go to the right. It won't tell you it's complete. It just didn't throw any kind of error. So as soon as it gets to the end, you're done and you can close this little window. And now what this has done, if you go to that PTF folder, you'll see that you have this export CSV. Okay. I don't recommend just opening it in a text file. I would just open it with a Excel itself. All right, just be cautious, and you'll kind of see this at the end. I'm going to do it don't convert because it looks like I had some leading zeros probably for maybe like some item number or something. Okay, so this is what got exported. So the first column in here, column A, is the row sequence. So if we kind of look side by side between our test, you'll see our test has the sequence. Column B on the Excel that got export is the row ID. So you'll see the row ID. These are IDs that are generated when you save the test. It's pretty much on the trigger on the database table. It returns the next ID in the sequence. Okay. Whereas the sequence, the first column is the order of execution from 1 to N. The IDs are, as you manipulate a test, a new ID just gets generated to the lines that you've placed in the test. So these two do get pushed into the Excel, but the actual type, the action, the recognition do not. Okay, outside of PTF, they don't mean a lot, and maybe for security purposes, they choose not to export those. But in column C, you'll actually see default and all the data that is in this default test case, right? You see the VP1s, these no, direct no, the component reference, the update, all the data is going to be in the C column, right? Because I only had one test case, which is called default in there. There's a VP1, there's a no, direct, yes, no. You'll see the combination for that single line within the requisition, okay? And then the chart field information, okay? You can manipulate the data here, and then on import, it can actually update any existing test cases. That's why you had that current and all. So if you did want to change many, many different test cases, and instead of selecting each one within the PTF tool, you could do it kind of holistically here within Excel itself, right? But we just have one test case, and we could manipulate that. Maybe we want to change the price here to a different price, maybe a smaller, maybe the quantity needs to go up. And then when we import it, we can actually choose in the staging tool if we want to overwrite the existing one that's already in there, or just don't do anything to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create some additional test cases, and the test case names have to be kind of defined here, starting at C2 if you want to change the default one, but obviously D2 and onwards, okay? Test case names are unique, okay, within a given script. So you cannot have two test case 002 and 002. When you import it, it's going to yell at you that there's already two test cases in the file that have the same name. So this is not allowed. It's got to be either sequential, or you don't have to use numbers, but I like stuff that has numbers just for demo purposes. But you could call it for this kind of business unit, for this kind of requester, for this kind of item, for this kind of vendor. Whatever is a good descriptor, up to 30 characters for your test case names. Let's do it in that starting at D2 onwards, okay? And then everything else, I'm just going to copy over, okay? Because it's actually, of course, Excel is going to increment that automatically for me. So let's do it to R. Make sure you have the test case names as well, going to R. And then we could increment some stuff in here. So maybe from 600, 700, and then so that all the data is a little different. There we go, we incremented that data. Let's do some different quantities. And of course, you have to know what your lines are each. You could select different categories. Here I have cycling as the category, but you can change. So you could change any of the data on any of the lines to anything you want. Okay, here it did import different business units because, again, I just copied it over, different chart fields, and obviously you don't want to just, okay, it kept the chart field info exactly the same so that it's going to the same account. But these business units, these GL business units are obviously going to fail if I do loop this test. So I'm going to keep those the same, okay? So you're able to transpose data from other Excels, you're able to mix and match all the functionality and features that you would usually have within Excel. You have them, and you can mock up all of your test data and then import it, of course, back into your test, and then run through a loop or just run through the individual tests to check your system. You could also do the same with these users. Maybe this user, I'm going to myself, maybe somebody else, John D. Okay. So you can kind of mix and match different users as well. All right. Obviously, they might have a different password, and you can have encrypted passwords in here. These are just static VP1 passwords. Okay. So we've mocked up some data. We've defined the test case names at the top. The next thing we need to do is save this off. But be careful when you don't just do a general save to this file, because Excel will impose its own standards. Even though it's a comma delimited CSV, it's going to do stuff to it. So what I usually do is I'll do a save as, okay? Let's call this import now in the same folder, and it is comma delimited CSV. So you got to make sure you have comma delimited CSV selected, all right? You press save, okay? And then you've got to make sure you close the Excel file, okay? Close the Excel file, which of course will take you back to the PTF test. But of course, in the folder, I've got my export CSV and my import CSV just sitting here. And you can see it's a much larger file because obviously we added a lot more data to it, all right? So we completed step one, which is we created the template, we filled out the Excel file, And now we're going to consume it back into the test so that it gets loaded into our test cases. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to test again. And this time I'm going to do import. We did export to create the template. I'm going to do import to consume it back into the PTF tool. Okay, so I'm going to select the file now, which is now called import. Okay, the delimiter is going to be comma, and then you want to do an open. And what this area does, this is like your final staging area. Okay, it allows you to see everything that's on the file even before you import it into your PTF test, because I still have one test case count here. Okay. And the first thing you do is, okay, default, I'm going to replace, and this is where I was talking about, you can replace, or you can import as new and you got to define a different test name, or you can uncheck it, like don't do anything to the default one. Okay. I know it's in the file and I messed with it, but just don't do it, or check it. And yes, I do want to update the data that's in my default test case from what I did in the Excel. Okay. And then everything else I'm going to import as new because that's the only option. These didn't exist before, so I'm going to import them as new. And this also allows you one last area to define more granular names. Maybe now for business BU001, I want to call test case 6 for BU005. Okay, so it's one more place to kind of mess with the test case name. Then you'll press start. Again, same as the export, it's just going to do a green bar all the way. It didn't throw any kind of errors that you had name inconsistencies or invalid values. And now when I close out of this window, you will see that this count goes from 1 to 16, right? From A to R. There are all our test cases. Okay. And as I select different test cases, if I kind of toggle it and kind of notice the names, because remember I kind of messed with some who's logging in, you'll see that we have different data combinations here. And obviously we have much different data combinations within the lines. If I toggle that, you'll see the prices are different. We've got different vendor IDs. You guys see that? How it's kind of changing right there. Okay, so we've imported different data combinations for a test. The test structure does not change because that's the script. The test cases, which are the value column, does change because we want to simulate different business units, different amounts, and this is the manual way to load that data. Okay, and then in other videos, I've kind of shown you how to loop through a given test, and you can loop and create, calls from one test to another. I'll call the individual test cases, so you could loop all of these in kind of a sequence, or call specific ones, because specific ones might be part of an end-to-end test, which is also in another video that's coming up, where we're calling different situations and different data combinations as part of our end-to-end testing. Okay, one scenario says to create this kind of requisition that, for procure to pay end-to-end perspective, flows through a different approval chain, through different POs, through a different vendor when you go to do the pay cycle. And then another set of combinations of data has different amounts, different vendors, and different chart field combos. So it's just another way to add data if you don't want to do it manually, slowly through this process. Excel is a great way to do it using this import and export feature within PTF. So hopefully that showed you a good little sample of the tool, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.